Okay, so have you ever been scrolling through the news, you know how you do, and you see an article, some big project getting loads of funding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, we're talking millions, euros even,
Mm.
enough to make your head spin. And it just makes you wonder how they pulled it off, right? Like, what's the secret sauce to snagging these massive EU grants?
Definitely. It feels like there's some kind of magic formula at play.
Right, so that's what we're diving into today, trying to demystify this whole process. And we're using this company, Alpha Cube Consulting, as our our case study, I guess you could say.
Okay.
We've gone through their material, some articles about them too, just to get a good feel for what they're all about.
Yeah, makes sense.
So first things first, who is Alpha Cube Consulting? Well, they've basically put themselves out there as the experts in winning those coveted EU grants. And not just, small change either. We're talking 1 to 14 million euros per project.
Wow.
Yeah. But here's the thing that I find really interesting. They're all about what they call, quote, excellence over targets, end quote,
Mm.
which is like almost refreshing, compared to all those other consulting firms that are just obsessed with KPIs and hitting those numbers no matter what.
It is a different way of framing it, for
Yeah.
sure.
And then they also have this whole thing about making sure their consultants are passionate about the projects and they have the freedom to, really make it their own.
Interesting.
And that really piqued my curiosity. I wanted to know more about that.
Yeah, it is intriguing, especially when you think about how crazy competitive it is to secure large-scale EU funding in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you've got all those regulations, right? And the proposals have to be like airtight. And then there's the paperwork on top of it all.
Don't even get me started on the paperwork.
We're talking applications that are over 350 pages long.
Oh, my gosh.
So when Alpha Cube is out there boasting a 100% project approval rate,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, are they geniuses or are they just really good at telling a good story?
Right.
That's definitely something we need to unpack. And that kind of leads us to this whole work of art thing they've got going on.
Right.
Which, gotta admit, it's a pretty catchy way to think about these million-euro projects.
Definitely. Way more exciting than, like, spreadsheets and funding guidelines, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, writing a grant application, is it really an art form?
Well, maybe think about it this way. You're not just presenting facts and figures, right? It's got to be a narrative.
Okay.
A story that shows why this project matters and why it fits with what the EU wants to see happen.
So it's like you need that creative spark to really grab their attention.
Exactly. And it seems like Alpha Cube gets that, They talk about these premium services, which to me sounds a lot like having seasoned consultants who are as much storytellers as they are, well, experts in their fields.
Okay, so it's not just ticking boxes on a checklist then. They're crafting a compelling pitch.
Exactly.
But what about this whole freedom and passion angle? They keep emphasizing that. How does that play into all of this?
That's the big question, right? On paper, it sounds amazing. Empowering your people, letting them chase their passions, that should lead to more innovative, more engaging projects.
Because really, who's more invested than someone who's genuinely excited about the work?
Exactly. And there's always a but, right? Too much freedom, not enough structure, that can backfire.
Yeah, you can end up with projects going off the rails, missing deadlines, you name it.
Exactly. It's a balancing act, for sure.
For sure. And just to throw another wrench in the gears, they've mentioned AI too. Seems like everyone's hopped on the AI train these days.
Right.
But how does that even work with something like grant writing?
Well, it's not like AI is taking over completely, at least not yet. Think of it more like a super-powered assistant.
Okay, I like that.
Remember those massive applications we talked about? AI can sift through mountains of data, like past successful proposals, and pinpoint patterns, trends, things we might miss.
So it's like having an AI sidekick who knows exactly what makes those EU funders tick.
Precisely. And it can streamline stuff like finding the right funding calls, spotting potential problems based on previous submissions, even making sure you've dotted all the I's and crossed the T's.
Oh, wow. So it frees up the human experts to focus on the bigger picture stuff.
Exactly. Strategy, narrative, all that good stuff.
Sounds like a pretty potent combo, you got to admit. But let's be real here for a second. A 100% success rate. That's practically unheard of, even in the best of circumstances. Could it be that Alpha Cubes, well, maybe they're exaggerating just a tad?
It's a fair question, and a healthy dose of skepticism is never a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, their track record looks impressive, sure, But it's always smart to look a little closer. Client testimonials, case studies, stuff that backs up those claims.
Yeah, because anyone can say they're the best.
Exactly. Actions speak louder than words, after all.
For sure, for sure.
And it's worth noting, Alpha Cube's mentioned growing really quickly since they started in 2019.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of trajectory, well, it can be a mixed bag.
How so?
Well, rapid growth often means bringing in new people, branching into new areas, and maybe, just maybe, taking on projects outside their comfort zone.
So it's like they're spreading themselves a bit thin, maybe?
It's a risk, for sure.
Yeah.
Can they keep that same level of quality, that individual touch when they're growing so fast? It's a valid question.
Yeah, growing pains are real. But even with the best people and all the AI in the world getting funding, it's not just about what Alpha Cube does, right?
Yeah.
The project itself has to be top-notch.
Absolutely.
It can't just be some half-baked idea, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's got to be solid, and it's got to fit with, the EU's overall goals, what they're trying to accomplish.
Right, right. Because you could have the best pitch in the world, but if the project itself doesn't make sense for them.
It's DOA.
Exactly. Like trying to sell ice to an Eskimo.
There you go. Perfect analogy.
So going back to Alpha Cube, it seems like they really get that, right? That it takes more than just, I don't know, a flashy presentation or whatever.
Oh, no, absolutely. They understand that whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
A good project, a good story, and knowing what the EU is looking for.
It's almost like they're telling two stories at once. One for the project and one about them. Like, look how we do things differently and how well it works.
Right, right. Which, again, begs the question, how much of their success is, the actual approach and how much is just, really good branding?
Yeah. Is it substance over style or style over substance? Maybe it's a bit of both.
Probably a bit of both. I mean, they clearly know their stuff when it comes to EU funding, but it's that storytelling element, that focus on narrative, that might be what sets them apart.
Makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, we've all heard those stories, right? Brilliant ideas. But the people behind them, they just couldn't get the message across.
All the time.
And it makes you wonder how many potentially game-changing projects are out there, just waiting for the right story to bring them to life.
It's true. It's not enough to just have a great idea. You need to be able to communicate it in a way that resonates.
To get people on board.
Exactly.
Well, there you have it. Our deep dive into the world of million-euro projects with a little help from the intriguing case of Alpha Cube Consulting.